All right. This video here, this YouTube video is for my AP World and AP European students. And this is how we're going to be handling what we're going to do for, I think I have 4 weeks left to review AP European and 5 weeks left for AP World. And I just want to say up front, what I am probably best at teaching to history students is the DBQ. I know a lot of you are trained by Ann Shell and the other two new teachers we have out there now. But I have a pretty good success rate with it. And I was kind of let down when I heard they were giving a DBQ because I thought they're going to make it so easy this year. Anybody can pass the exam, which I know sounds good. But for AP World, they're only going to have about half the kids pass. For AP European, they're only going to have about 58%. So if they make it easy and then everyone does well, it's going to make it harder for my students to do well, although I hope as many kids pass as can. But anyway, I want to give you an advantage. But as I've been looking at this rubric, I actually think it's going to be pretty hard this year. And it's going to be pretty hard, especially for sophomores taking AP World to pass this exam. Anyway, let's go over the College Board rubric. So anyway, this is going to be a graded assignment. So you need to write the title down here. I'm going to click and go on the next slide. You can pause it if you need to write this down. It's for both classes, although I'll give you some minor differences here. All right, so here's the College Board rubric, okay, just for this year. Normally the exam's worth 6 or 7 points. This year it's worth 10, okay, and I'm going to go step by step. And I'm going to send you out Tom Ritchie's rubric that he made up, but I'm going to tell you what I think my kids are going to do well on, what I think they're not going to do well on. But it's going to be worth 10 points. A lot of smart people think that you're going to need to get 6 points right to get a 3, which may sound easy, but it really isn't. Anyway, let's go on here. So again, you don't need to, actually you do need to copy this down. So pause the video and go ahead and copy this down. And when you're done, start the video back up because I'm going on here. Okay. All right, so the first point is contextualization. It's 1 point. And here's what I want you to write in your notes about contextualization. So write down the word contextualization. It cannot be a passing phrase. It cannot be 1 or 2 words. You see it right here. The point is not awarded for merely a phrase or a reference. Now, 2 years ago when I graded the DBQ for AP World, they did give kids credit for 1 or 2 words. But if you've heard me give this speech, I've definitely given it to my AP World kids. I don't know about my AP European kids this year. But some years they set a high bar and they set a low bar. This year, I expect them to set a high bar, so you need to follow the rules. So contextualization needs to be like 3 or 4 sentences. And contextualization can be what happened before, what happened during, or what happened after, but nobody does during or after. Pretty much everybody does what happened before the time period you're talking about. And I can tell you, I think the first year I taught AP World was in 2005. And I've been grading since, I don't know, 2009. I don't remember what year I started grading, but I've been an AP World reader for a long time. Nobody gets this point. I won't say nobody, but maybe 15 or 20% of the kids who do this get the point for it. So it's very rare that kids get this, and we're going to talk about how you can do that. Okay, that's the first point. Make sure you write this down. Write down everything I told you. It needs to be at least 3 sentences. Moving on, the second point is the thesis, and both the contextualization and the thesis go in the introduction. I am actually fairly confident that my kids can do a thesis. I think I've graded DBQs 4 different years in my 12 years, however many years I've been grading AP World exams, and they give credit for very, very badly written theses. I've never seen them have a really hard standard for a thesis, not on the DBQ. And so the ABC system that I've taught you, I think will work. So I'm pretty convinced that most of you, if you do what I've told you, you can get this point. This year, a lot of teachers think that you can do 2 groups. We're going to talk about this. Remember, for AP World, we're going to spend the next 5 weeks on this. For AP European, the next 4 weeks. We're going to still be reviewing like we've done, and you're going to see why here. We're going to be reviewing all the curriculum in the course, but you'll see why we're doing that. But we're going to be doing DBQs and partial DBQs every week. Anyway, so thesis, just write down in your notes, write the word thesis, write down continue with my ABC method, and I want you to letter them. And by the way, I know some of the kids in the A-Push classes and some of the other AP World students are going to be using this system too. And I don't mind if you share my, I know who you are in AP European who's sharing this with your A-Push buddies. Go right ahead. But anyway, feel free to share this with the kids in the other classes. And if they're teachers, some of them, like Mr. Anshel, he may have a better system. That's fine. Okay, so moving on. That's point 2. This is the second point, and I'm pretty sure my kids, if they do what I told them, this will be a fairly easy point. Now, here's where it gets a little bit complicated. In this little slide here, we're going to go over 5 different points you can get. The first one is the easiest point on the whole thing. So if you look over here on the right here, it says accurately describes the content of at least 2 documents. So if you basically go through and take 2 documents and discuss what's in those 2 documents, you are going to get this point. It's the easiest point, and you probably don't even have to do that much discussion. So if you mention 2 documents and you describe it, now you can't use quotes. Quotes are a waste of time. A lot of kids just go in there and put quote, quote, quote from the documents. The AP readers have read these documents. By the time they get to your paper, they have probably read them 600 times. They have these things memorized. You are wasting your time. Sometimes I'll put a 1 or 2 word quote. It's okay, but it's not going to get you a point. But if it helps you explain, fine. But quotes are not good enough for this point. Now, the second thing here where it says supports. Now, here's where this gets interesting. If you do my ABC method or AB method, where you have a lettered thesis, let's say you come up with 2 groups this year because there's only 7 documents. If you come up with 2 groups, I still think you should do 3, but we'll talk about this later on. If you come up with 2 groups, you're going to do 2 body paragraphs. If in those body paragraphs, let's say you take point A and restate it in the topic sentence, and then you analyze 2 documents in detail. Now, we're going to go over this here in a few minutes, but it can't be 1 sentence. I tell kids they need to spend at least 3 sentences explaining why each document goes along with what your topic sentence says, which goes along with what your thesis said. Okay? If you do this for 2 documents, well, it's called arguing. They're going to call it supporting, but you're supporting an argument. If you do that for 2 documents, you get a point. Most of you, if you do what I've trained you, you will get that. If you do that for 2 more points, 2 more documents, I meant, if you spend at least 3 sentences discussing 2 more documents that are backing up your topic sentence, which is backing up your lettered thesis, you get another point. So I think right here that most of my students will get that first point and they'll get both of these. That's 3 points. You add the thesis on top of that, you've got 4 points. All you need is 2 more points to get to your 6 points. Now, most of you would like to get a 4 or 5 on this exam. And who knows, maybe they'll require a 7 this year to get a 3. But a lot of smart people think that you're going to need to get 6 points. Now, the last 2 points here is where they talk about the document's point of view, purpose, historical situation, and our audience. That's what a lot of teachers call sourcing. For AP World this year, I've been using CAPS. I've talked about CAPS in AP European. About half the AP European kids had me. Some had Anshel, some had Orton. Anshel calls it sourcing. I think Peters and Durham, I don't know, Durham used to use CAPS. She may be using Hippo now. Any of these things are fine. And again, we're going to talk about this in a minute, but this is something my students can do. Just remember, when you do CAPS, it's got to be, or Hippo, whichever one you want to call it, it's got to be 2-part. You got to explain who said it and what's unique. We're going to come back to that in a minute. Anyway, there's 5 points on this page. I'm confident most of my students can get this. It's the and the thesis, and that will get them their 6 points. The contextualization, I am not at all convinced that most students can do that, including my own. All right, now we're moving on to you're taking notes on all this, I hope. Okay, now moving on to the next slide. All right, now here's where this gets a little bit tricky. I've been teaching AP World since 2005, and this point didn't used to be on the exam. And I talked to some really smart people. I went out to my AP World discussion group, actually my AP European discussion group. By the way, for those of you in AP World, the rubric for AP World, A-Push, and AP European are exactly the same. They're all exactly the same, and that's why you heard me reference some of the A-Push kids are going to use my system because they had me for AP World last year. And last year, just the planets were aligned, and I had probably more fives in AP World than I've ever had before. It was just a very good year last year, and a lot of those kids are sitting in European, and a lot of the kids, you know, that didn't pass last year are sitting in European, but this is your year, okay? All right, so here's where this is going to get interesting here. You get up to 2 more points here for using specific historical evidence to back up your argument. Now, it's not additional evidence just at random on maybe the person who said it. It has to back up your argument. So this is actually, once I started studying this, this is actually pretty hard to get. Most kids do not get this. So this is where we're going to spend a lot of time on the next 2 weeks. Remember that last slide, I think you can get all 5 of those points. I think you can do the thesis points. I think where my kids are in trouble are in the contextualization. Now, my European kids should be in pretty good shape. My world kids, it's not. It's just that you are young and this is your first experience with this. But anyway, this is actually going to be quite tricky. So, and we're going to go over this in a minute. But remember when you have your thesis, it's in lettered points, A, B, and C, or A and B. Then you have your body paragraphs. You have as many body paragraphs as you have letters up there in your thesis. What you have to do, whatever your argument is in your topic sentence, you have to come up with additional facts to back up the argument. Okay? Not necessarily to give more information on the document, but to back up your argument. If you do this effectively for 2 documents, you get 2 more points. Okay? All right, and I'm going to give you an example here in a minute. All right, next slide here, and this is the last point. This is, I don't know why the other teachers call it the unicorn point. And I know that the A-Push teachers teach this. I never have. And I will tell you this about Richie. I know those in AP World don't know who Tom Ritchie is, but the European kids do. He is the resident genius on AP European. And he says, I know 2 people who I respect. Tom Ritchie, who I use in AP European, and those in AP World, that guy Heinler, whose videos you've been watching, he's another genius too. Both of them think it's a waste of time for you to go for this point, and I would agree with them. It's a waste of time, and the stats are on the AP European and History and US AP World, Euro, and US exams, only 2% of the kids get this point. It's almost impossible to get, so why even bother? And here is a meme that Richie made about it. Some of you Star Wars fans can understand this. Well, heck, I don't know what happened to it. Somewhere in here, there's a graphic. Shoot, I'm going to pause the video. Tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to just flat out stop the video now that I've messed up here. And I'll put this meme into the next video. So we've just finished the rubric here. And we're down to 10 points. And we're talking about the unicorn point.